Hello and welcome to everybody. My name is Gregory FEIFER. I am the Executive Director of the Institute of Current World Affairs, and we're very happy to see you all here today. There is perhaps no issue more central in the rise of right-wing populism that's sweeping the world than the debate over immigration. It was the central issue for the Trump campaign in this country, and at the center of one of the oldest intractable debates in Congress. And yet, even critics of the promise to build a wall on the Mexican border often fail to talk about the full context of the debate, including the US role behind the conditions driving Latin American migration today.
I think what the world wants from migrants first is to get here. That's the very first thing a migrant's supposed to do, is arrive. And then what's the second thing they're supposed to do? Get out, right, leave. That's the second thing the world wants migrants to do. All over the world, it's Germany, it's Thailand, it's Japan, it's anywhere. Please come as fast as you can get here and do these jobs, and then please leave as soon as these jobs are done. And this was a system that worked for hundreds of years, really since antiquity, that a just-in-time labor force would come and fulfill needs in the economy, and those most qualified to assimilate and stay would thrive in their new country, and this is how humanity developed. It's only been in the last 100 years that we've adopted a different standard, which is to treat prosperity and opportunity as a luxury good that should be excluded from some people and available to others. And we've become more and more punitive all over the world in how we treat migrants. And the consequence of that is, the harder it is to get to a country, the more impossible it is to ever leave.
So thank you again to Greg at the ICWA for the invitation to be here, and to you all for being here. I think in setting the stage to start answering some of the questions that Joel poses to us today, which is migrants getting here and then what happens to them when they're here, I wanted to talk about why migrants are currently arriving at the US-Mexico border, and what happens to them while they're here, in particular Latin American migrants. I'll start by saying that we've certainly seen a rhetoric from this administration that has sought to criminalize and dehumanize all migrants, but in particular Latin American migrants. The wall has become a symbol of this disrespect and hate, not just towards Mexico, but I would say to the rest of Latin America and its immigrants. In terms of specific policies, we're seeing a ramped up immigration enforcement in the interior of the country. We've seen a 40% increase in apprehensions of undocumented individuals in fiscal year 17 compared to the previous fiscal year 16. Not differentiating between families and individuals. These apprehensions are happening without differentiating who is being arrested or where. And there are efforts to process and deport the numbers of arrested individuals quickly, as Joel said, to get them out, and to increase the number of detention beds within the country. So that's a little bit about what's happening in terms of the interior. We're also seeing a sort of empowered migration enforcement agencies, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and then also Customs and Border Protection, CBP. That's resulted in them acting with impunity, in worsening also conditions in detention centers, and also in increases in use of force by Border Patrol agents. So that is affecting a large percentage of Latin American immigrants who are undocumented within the United States. We've seen the termination of long-standing protection programs, such as the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, and then also the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS program, which affects around 800,000 Dreamers, mostly from Mexico and Central America, and then also around 300,000 individuals from Haiti, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, who have benefited from the TPS program and have lived here for many, many years. Finally, we have seen the termination also of in-country refugee processing programs in Central America. So there was a program under the Obama administration by which parents of legal status in the United States could petition for their children in Central America to apply for refugee protection in the United States without having to leave their home country through the US embassies. And this program had received around 12,000 applications from children in the Northern Triangle countries of Central America. And that program has also been terminated, leaving families and children who are in a situation of danger with no option but to flee or make the journey to the United States. For those of us who know very well the conditions in Central America of corruption, violence, and impunity, and have documented those conditions recently in a report that we did called Between a Wall and a Dangerous Place, which is where we feel people are increasingly being pushed. We do believe it's an ongoing refugee crisis in the Northern Triangle countries of Central America. And so having this conversation becomes ever more important when we talk about also what are the conditions in these countries.
This notion of get out, it's a byproduct of the notion of the creation of the nation state basically from the 15th century, the 16th century, where you establish boundaries, and by establishing boundaries and defining territory, you also define nations. And the nation state established what is an insider and who constitutes an outsider. From that moment on, the idea of human mobility translated, or the practice of human mobility translated into migrancy. And migrancy manifested itself into whether you were belonging to one place or the other. The result of that is that the state created policies of different sorts. Getting in and getting out is one policy, but it's not the only one, because historically, nation states also established pathways for not only citizenship, but also for relief and refuge. There is the history of refuge in nation states goes back hundreds of years. So we have built this pattern. It's just the bureaucracies of establishing these distinctions between insider and outsiders and accepting and tolerating the outsider as an insider always get very complicated. And one of the factors that make this very complicated is the national identity itself, that people themselves hold it very dearly. Being an American, being someone from X country, etc., always comes across as part of something material to them, very concrete. It could be, a white Anglo-Saxon individual, a Christian person. And those profilings eventually become truth as to what constitutes a person from a given country. The consequence is that when a society is becoming far more complex in the multicultural context, it is very difficult to define what constitutes to be an American. In fact, I think the 2016 election was all about what did it mean to be an American. What we are dealing with right now is precisely a consequence of anxieties in our society about the growth of not migration, but the multi-ethnic nature of the United States.
Immigration has been criminalized, and the people that are being put into this justice system before, it used to be a civil matter. So it was like suing somebody. That was how the US would deal with immigration cases. Now they're dealing with them as felonies, and people are being held in prison without any rights. And I think the biggest issue right now, or debate going on, is what rights do we give immigrants who are being held in detention in prison? These detention centers are run by the same companies that run the prison system, so they don't have access to attorneys. So in a lot of cases, you have even children going before a judge and trying to argue their cases, and they're, I think, purposely placed that way so that they can go through so many of them, because there's a backlog of at least 600,000 cases in the justice system right now. So there's not enough judges, there's not enough attorneys, there's not enough people also paying attention to the fact that we are deporting people basically to countries that we've helped. At least our policies, the State Department, for example, in El Salvador, was the same department that intervened before the Civil War in El Salvador. And they're also the same ones that are debating whether they take this temporary protective status away from people. It's the same department. I think that is something that we have to both cite as much as possible in our stories, and also as people and readers remember that those are the consequences.